Hello, listeners. Happy New Year. Starting this month, the MCP will be returning to our original schedule of 2 episodes per month. However, 1 episode will be exclusively for patrons of the MCP. The other episode will remain completely free for all listeners. If you'd like double the number of episodes, go to bit.ly/morbidpatron, that's bit.ly/morbidpatron, to become a patron. Make sure to choose the tiers that offer double episodes. And for those of you who are already patrons, please make sure to switch to the new tiers so you receive your extra episodes. The price has not changed per episode, you'll just receive 2 episodes. The old single episode tiers will remain active, and the rewards will still be available to all tiers. I also wanted to say thank you to all of you, patrons and listeners, for your support. I wouldn't be able to run this podcast without you, the creepy community. You humble me, and I appreciate you all. Thank you so much. Please forgive my pronunciations of the French words in this episode. French is not my first language, and while I've done my best, I probably won't get them quite right. This episode contains discussions of enslaved peoples, trade in enslaved peoples, colonialism, and execution. Humans are fascinated by gore and violence, but even more so the mysterious and unsolved. Interest in these disturbing and unpleasant subjects is called morbid curiosity, and it has gripped millions of people throughout the ages. I am one of those people. My name is Hallie, and this is the Morbid Curiosity Podcast. When we hear the word pirate, images of weather-beaten, peg-legged, tri-point hat-wearing rogues with talking parrots fill our minds. We imagine ships sailing the waters of the Caribbean and the Atlantic Ocean, chasing after merchant ships and flying a black flag adorned with a skull and crossbones. The treasure they steal is then buried on remote islands that can only be found using a map the pirates themselves made. This colorful portrait of the stereotypical pirate comes from a book, Treasure Island, by Robert Louis Stevenson, published in 1880. This popular imagery is a mix of truth and fiction. Real historic pirates were indeed weather-beaten and sported injuries and scars because life at sea was rough. Injuries were pretty much guaranteed, and due to the lack of medical knowledge at the time, wounds often became infected, and amputations were a common way of dealing with that. Parrots were a common pirate pet, as they were easy to care for and good for morale. The Jolly Roger, the black flag with the white skull and crossbones, was a real flag flown by pirates. Also, pirates did generally go after merchant vessels because they weren't well armed and had plenty of loot to steal. Not mentioned in popular pirate media was the fact that pirates were generally healthier than most sailors due to more varied diets on stolen rations. Pirates weren't unnecessarily aggressive either, as battle would lead to injuries. Each crew member was skilled and important to the running of the ship. Any killed crew had to be replaced, usually by abducted crew from a plundered ship, and their loyalty wasn't guaranteed, so pirates did their best to avoid violence. Another thing not often mentioned in widespread pirate media was that many pirates were involved in the trade of enslaved peoples, either directly or indirectly. While it's true that enslaved peoples could find freedom in a pirate crew, there is ample evidence of pirates trading with slavers or trading enslaved people for other items. I'll discuss this more later in the episode. One thing popular pirate stories got right are the existence of pirate havens. Many pirates chose small, uninhabited or lightly inhabited islands as a base of operations. These islands were desirable due to their natural security, such as cliffs, rough coasts, and difficult-to-navigate bays. These features made them easy hiding places as well as safe places to repair ships and relax between raids. Many of these havens were close to active trade routes, so that there were constant opportunities to raid heavily laden merchant ships. The havens were also places where loot could be divided up and enjoyed. Most pirate havens were inhabited during what historians call the Golden Age of Piracy between 1650 and 1726 CE. This is when large, organized pirate societies with large fleets were a reality and a menace to the growing international trade operations of large colonial powers such as Britain, France, and Spain. Pirates took advantage of the chaos caused by squabbles between these nations to raid merchant ships traveling to and from the Americas with exotic goods and supplies. When these nations tried to crack down on piracy, the pirates moved their operations to the Indian Ocean. Before we go into detail on piracy in the Indian Ocean and the resulting pirate havens, some more context is needed to understand how and why the Golden Age of Piracy came about. Just a note, most information about pirates comes from records of their public executions and state papers regarding complaints made by merchants, governors, admiralty, and plantation owners who were harassed by pirates. In short, we have little info from the pirates themselves, which skews the narrative quite a bit. Pirates have long been associated with the British Isles. Reports of pirates appear as early as 55 BCE, when Roman general, later Emperor Julius Caesar crossed the English Channel to suppress what was reported as Celtic pirates. By the reign of King Henry VIII of England, pirates were such a problem and so hard to convict that in 1536, pirate cases were moved from Admiralty Court to Civil Court so that circumstantial evidence could be admissible during trials. Under Queen Elizabeth I, however, piracy was supported by the Crown in the form of privateers. Faced with the threat of invasion by Spain, Elizabeth, who ruled from 1558 to 1603, turned to pirates to supplement the British Navy by sanctioning a controlled version of piracy called privateering. Privateers were usually private individuals, aka pirates or ex-British navymen, who agreed to target Spanish ships and pay the Crown some of the spoils. In this way, Spanish trade and economy were interrupted, and the British Crown made a bit of gold while maintaining plausible deniability. Some of the most famous privateers were Sir Francis Drake and Sir Walter Raleigh. The Royal Commission granted to privateers, also known as a letter of marque, protected them from accusations of piracy. If they had their letter and followed its conditions, they were legally able to raid and plunder the specified vessels. Privateers gained the potential for greater profit than they would have had working in the Navy or as a merchant sailor. However, this profit sometimes led privateers to go pirate, either after the privateers weren't required anymore or when they got tired of paying the Crown a percentage of their loot. Privateering was not without risk. Besides the dangers of attacking and raiding ships, rulers often changed abruptly, so the legality and protected status of privateers and their actions could end at any moment, making them pirates according to the law. For example, James I and then Charles I, who succeeded Elizabeth I, did not permit privateering. But Queen Anne, who ruled from 1665 to 1714, commissioned and supported many privateers during her reign. Due to the constant changes in the laws surrounding privateering, some privateers ended up being prosecuted for piracy. Captain William Kidd accepted a privateering commission from King William III of England, but was later hanged for piracy after attacking the wrong ship and putting English trade with the Mughal Empire of India and South Asia in jeopardy. At his trial, he was unable to produce his letter of marque to prove his innocence. After their services were no longer required, work options for privateers were often unappealing. One option was to join the Navy. The British Navy was very regimented and low paid. Rank and position on the ships were based on wealth and birthright, not skill. Higher ranks were also paid more than other crew members. The naval leaders controlled almost every aspect of life on the ship and often withheld pay for minor infractions. The ships were also crowded, which bred disease. A pirate ship, on the other hand, was defined by equality and democracy. Captains were elected and could also be voted out. Pirate ships weren't as crowded and carried ample medical supplies, as these were often the first things stolen when raiding a ship. The food was also more varied and the alcohol more plentiful due to raids on a variety of vessels. Every member of the crew was paid equally, be it captain or deckhand. As for rank, a pirate ship was one of few places where a person could move up in rank based on skill instead of birth or wealth. Because pirate ships were like miniature nations, they had their own cultures. Religious freedom and diversity were respected. The crews were often multicultural. Both freed and escaped enslaved Africans were known to work on pirate vessels. It's not known if racism was an issue, but all crew members were definitely paid better and valued more than they would have been on a Navy vessel. Pirate crews also had female members. While women did sometimes sail on Navy ships too, such as captains' wives, cooks, and sex workers, women could be valued members of pirate crews with the same rights as male crew members. Still, many women, likely more than we know, disguised as men to go to sea. Around 50% of pirates during the Golden Age were British males, many of which were former officers of the Royal Navy or former merchants who knew the cost of goods and where to sell them. Pirates were good for the economy of the American colonies, as both parties avoided paying taxes to the crown. This made pirates valued members of colonial society. There are many examples of letters insisting that incarcerated pirates be released for the good of the community. The Crown, on the other hand, felt the pirates were disrupting trade and corrupting their colonists. Britain had to control the pirates to control Atlantic Ocean trade. Therefore, new laws against piracy were passed in 1681. Military vessels began patrolling the waters of the Atlantic Ocean. To avoid capture, most pirates moved their raids to the Indian Ocean, where the British had less influence and control, but trade was still booming. When European and New World pirates moved into the area, the Mughal Empire was the major player in long-distance trade. The British East India Company, or British EIC, offered protection for Indian merchant ships in exchange for trade contracts and the use of trading posts. When European pirates arrived in the Indian Ocean, they took advantage of the shaky relationship between the Mughal Empire and the EIC by seizing merchant ships from both parties. Many pirates set up bases on the island of Madagascar, just east of Mozambique and northeast of the Cape of Good Hope. From there, they could raid ships traveling the trade routes from India and Africa back to America and Europe, and the ships heading in and out of the Red Sea. Most European pirates in the Indian Ocean were English, so Mughal authorities thought they all were. When pirates attacked, the Mughal Empire would punish the EIC by shutting down trade with them, causing heavy financial losses. In 1697, the British EIC petitioned for a naval squadron to deal with the Madagascar pirates. The Crown hired privateers, giving them commissions to hunt the pirates and take French ships in order to interrupt French trade in the area. Unsurprisingly, many privateers, such as Captain Kidd, turned pirate, either when they stopped doing what the Crown wanted or made a mistake when the laws changed again. Now that we have some historical context, let's talk about pirate havens. Some of the havens mentioned in popular pirate media, such as the Pirates of the Caribbean films, were real places. Port Royal, which is portrayed in the first film as a British colony with a fort and a governor's mansion, was actually a pirate haven in Jamaica. Known as the Sodom of the Sea, pirates from all over the world congregated at Port Royal to enjoy their ill-gotten goods. It was notorious for the debauchery and ostentatiousness of its pirate inhabitants. Unfortunately, an earthquake and subsequent tsunami sank the town in 1692. Tortuga, which was portrayed in the first film as a pirate haven, was another famous island off the northern coast of Haiti. The island itself was conquered and claimed over and over by the French, British, and Spanish, but after taking the island, it was often left lightly guarded, as it wasn't profitable or useful as a military outpost. Therefore, it became a neutral haven for pirates. By 1640, the buccaneers of Tortuga were calling themselves the Brethren of the Coast, with Welsh privateer Henry Morgan being the most famous leader of this pirate group. One of the most famous and mysterious pirate havens was Libertatia, also known as Libertalia. This legendary pirate Utopia is mentioned in only one document, A General History of the Robberies and Murders of the Most Notorious Pirates, Volume 2, which is abbreviated as A General History of Pirates, Volume 2. The book was published in 1724 and authored by one Captain Charles Johnson, which is a pseudonym. No one knows the real author of the book, but it's theorized to be Daniel Defoe or Nathaniel Mist, both adventure authors at the time. According to Captain Johnson, Libertatia was a place where people of all colors, creeds, and beliefs could live free of scrutiny. It was said to be founded by Captain James Misson, also known as Olivier Misson or James Mission. Misson was supposedly serving on the French warship Victory when he lost his faith after learning of the corruption in the papal court in Rome. In speaking with a priest called Caraccioli, Misson rejected Christianity. Then he and the entire crew of the Victory took up piracy in defiance of the colonial powers of Europe. They created a pirate constitution promoting complete equality for all humans. Their new utopia would be anti-monarchy, anti-slavery, anti-institutionalized religion, and a direct democracy. Any enslaved person who entered the city would become free. Libertatia was said to be 13 miles east-southeast of the nearest town on a small island in the north of Madagascar. Johnson described it as a safe harbor with an elevated fort on either side, each with 40 guns. Below and between the two forts was the city, which was well funded and supplied by stolen goods captured from Spanish galleons, Portuguese men-of-war, French brigantines, and English schooners. The city unfortunately collapsed due to a military assault by the Portuguese some time before the book was published. The ruins of Libertatia have been sought by both treasure hunters and researchers who believe the most likely location is somewhere on or near St. Mary's Island in the north of Madagascar. Most historians believe the haven was fictional, apocryphal, or a utopian commentary. There's no concrete evidence to date that Libertatia or James Misson ever existed. Much of the information in A General History of Pirates was embellished, so the credibility of the work is already thin. Still, the legend reflects the direct governance found aboard most pirate ships and celebrates democracy at a time when that was a rarity. Many real pirate havens did exist in Madagascar until around 1730, and we're going to talk about them after a word from our sponsors. Our regular sponsor is Audible.com. Audible can provide you with interesting and engaging audiobooks. In fact, there are over 180,000 of them to choose from, which you can listen to on your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or other MP3 players. MCP listeners can get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial of Audible.com by going to www.audibletrial.com/MCP. You can also find this link on our Facebook page and website. If you sign up for the free trial, you get a free audiobook that is yours to keep, even if you cancel the service as soon as you finish downloading it. And the MCP gets the funding it needs to keep bringing morbid history to your ears. So go get your free audiobook on us. Lastly, if you like this podcast, why not sponsor the MCP yourself by becoming a patron on Patreon? Over 45,000 people download this podcast every month, but only around 140 people are supporting us on Patreon. For a mere $1 an episode, that's $2 a month, you can get ad-free episodes, bonus behind-the-scenes info, give your opinion by answering polls, have access to all the horror story readings, and get updates on past episodes. For $3 an episode, you get monthly outtake reels. For $5, you get a monthly quiz episode where I quiz my husband on past episodes. For $10, you get a detailed bibliography of all the resources I've used while researching an episode. And for $20, you get a bit of miscellaneous morbidity, a short essay on a random morbid topic every month. Previously, we have reviewed horror video games and television shows, discussed the plague pits of London, and tried out historic recipes from previous episodes. All of these rewards aside, your patronage supports the podcast and keeps new episodes coming. I can't keep doing this podcast without you, so go to bit.ly/morbidpatron, that's bit.ly/morbidpatron, to choose your rewards and support the MCP. You'll have my eternal gratitude. And now back to the podcast. Madagascar is the fourth largest island in the world. Arabic traders first arrived there in the 7th to 9th century CE. During the 11th century, South Indian Tamil traders brought zebu, long-horned cattle, to the island, which quickly became a staple for the indigenous Malagasy people. The Portuguese documented the island in the 1500s, and merchants began trading with the Malagasy in the 1660s. Pirates then took over trade on the island in the late 17th and early 18th century. Madagascar was an ideal location for ocean trading or raiding. It was near many European routes to the East Indies and local trade routes in the Red Sea, Arabian Sea, and the Bay of Bengal. On top of merchant ships, twice a year a fleet of Mughal ships carried pilgrims to Jeddah and Mecca via the Red Sea. The pilgrims were generally wealthy, and the ships were an easy target for pirates as they had few defenses. During this time, the island of Madagascar became the principal refuge of European pirates. It's likely the pirates had better dealings with the Malagasy, but that's not actually known. We don't know the exact relationship pirates had with the Malagasy. Many accounts that discuss it are anecdotal and don't go into cross-cultural encounters. In general, writers at the time focused on how pirates affected trade, not their social or cultural experiences. The pirates operated within the commercial networks that were already established in Madagascar, which included trade in enslaved peoples. During wars between the many different Malagasy peoples, slaves were often taken from the losing party. Before European contact, the enslaved were ransomed back to their families, but during the mid-17th to mid-18th century, the enslaved were sold to European slavers for a higher price than the ransom. They were traded for beads, copper wire, silver, and muskets. For European slavers, this price was far less than what was paid for enslaved peoples from other parts of Africa. At the end of the 17th century, the biggest traders of enslaved people from Madagascar were the British, who took them to Jamaica and Barbados to sell to plantation owners. This was a 1.5-year journey for the enslaved people, one that was fraught with starvation, abuse, and unimaginable horrors. In Madagascar, pirates very much depended on the elite members of the Malagasy for survival. In return, the pirates provided trade that benefited the Malagasy. While the Malagasy already had long-distance trade routes with East Africa, the Arabian Peninsula, and the Antiloatra, a Muslim seafaring people who also traded with the Swahili coast, through the pirates, the Malagasy gained access to Western goods, especially guns. However, the pirates avoided using the trading ports already used by the Antiloatra in the northwest of Madagascar and stuck to the eastern coast. Pirates often joined forces with local leaders. At the time, there was much political upheaval among the Malagasy, with many small city-states warring against one another. Many groups used the guns and the pirates to win their battles. This is how pirates living in the havens of Madagascar changed the way war was waged on the island. One pirate haven that became deeply embroiled in local politics for a short period was Fort Dauphin. This was a legitimate port on the southeast coast that had been abandoned in 1674 due to a lack of trade and hostile locals. The fort became a pirate haven with the arrival of Abraham Samuel. Samuel was born in Martinique, an island in the West Indies in the eastern Caribbean Sea, and was of mixed racial descent. In 1697, his ship landed at Fort Dauphin. An elderly indigenous princess saw him and immediately believed he was her long-lost son, who had been taken away by his French father in 1674. Samuel was proclaimed king of the Antanoses territory, the group to which the princess belonged. Samuel made a comfortable living raiding vessels that landed at the once legitimate port and selling the ships to other pirates. Unfortunately, in 1705, Samuel went to war with another local king, and, already being in bad health, died 2 months later. After his death, all the pirates that had been living at the fort left, including the 20 or so bodyguards Samuel had always kept around him. One of the more famous havens that was used for a longer length of time was Île Sainte-Marie, or St. Mary's Island, which is now known as Nosy Baraha. This long, thin island sits 4 miles, or 26 to 30 kilometers, off the coast of northeast Madagascar. The island, especially the Bay of Ambo-di-Fototra, became a base for pirates for many reasons. It had a supply of fresh water, fruit-bearing trees, it was isolated from the main island, it was a safe place to wait out monsoons, and it had a naturally protected bay which was excellent for repairing the hull of a ship. Around 1685, pirates moved to the island from the Caribbean. From then on, they were supplied by unscrupulous New York wholesalers who traded supplies for stolen spices, drugs, precious stones, Chinese blue and white porcelain, and textiles. The haven had started as an attempted trading post. In 1691, a New York merchant named Frederick Phillips chartered a ship to sail to the island with 7 men, led by Adam Baldridge, to set up a trading post. The crew set up a base, but by 1692, all of them were dead except for Baldridge and his apprentice. They allied themselves with the indigenous peoples of the island by using their muskets to win battles for them against rival groups. Baldridge eventually married a local woman, but he never fully integrated with the culture, preferring to stay in the fort he built on an island in the bay, now called Île aux Faubans, or Pirate Island. It's rumored that a system of tunnels was built beneath his fort, but nothing so far has been found. This island also contained the storage depot, a large meeting place, and an area where loot was divided up. A second island at the mouth of the bay, called Île aux Madame, or Madame Island, hosted the port, a warehouse originally built by the French East India Company in 1643, and a ship repair area. For a few years, slavers came to Baldridge's base to trade, with Baldridge acting as an intermediary between them and the Malagasy. Baldridge also helped pirates purchase cattle from the Malagasy. There seems to have been little to no cultural exchange, possibly even some animosity between the pirates and the Malagasy. The one time Baldridge left the island, his outpost was overthrown by the Malagasy after pirates tried to steal their cattle. Baldridge gave up the post and went back to America, leaving Edward Welch in charge. Welch helped piracy reach its full potential on Île Sainte-Marie. It became the temporary home of thousands of pirates between raids and during monsoon season. Wooden huts dotted the coast, displaying flags to show their crew loyalties. The island was described as a center for debauchery. Pirates dressed in outrageous outfits were said to stroll the island, adorned in fine silk and precious stones. Malagasy women walked with them, dressed in fine silk saris and ostentatious jewelry. The pirates repaired their ships, drank, gambled, and fornicated. Women, some of them sex workers, flocked to the island to join in the frivolity, and sometimes turned pirate themselves. The island even had a cemetery up on the hill above the bay. This cemetery still exists, with 30 or so headstones remaining. It's currently a major tourist attraction for the island. Around 300 pirates permanently lived on the island in 1698, many of which had taken Malagasy wives for political stability. Around this time, the British began hunting pirates in the Indian Ocean to save their trade relationship with the Mughal Empire. All the pirates in Madagascar were offered pardons if they gave up the life and helped hunt other pirates. Many took the offer. By 1711, less than 100 pirates remained on Île Sainte-Marie, and all were dirt poor. Their supply chain had dried up. In 1719, pirates were again driven from the Bahamas, and again they found refuge in Madagascar. The most famous of this second wave of pirates who settled down at Île Sainte-Marie was Christopher Condent, also known as Billy One Hand. The remains of his flagship, the Fiery Dragon, were found in the bay. Because of the rising presence of British warships in the area, when pardon was again offered, many pirates left voluntarily after having struggled to survive in Madagascar. The pirate life of Île Sainte-Marie ended in 1719. While it doesn't appear that pirates had much social impact, the introduction of firearms by pirates changed Madagascar forever. Guns helped the Sakalava people expand their territory in the 1650s and create a larger kingdom which dominated the northwestern regions of Madagascar during the 1700s. While much of pirate history has been skipped over, there is much that does line up with the popular view of swashbuckling rogues. Pirates were romanticized at the time and are still romanticized today. Hundreds of films, books, and now video games feature pirates. One I'd like to mention, as it stays quite true to its historical context, is Assassin's Creed Black Flag. While it takes place in the Caribbean, the game functions well as a visual aid on what piracy during the Golden Age was like. Libertatia is even mentioned in the game in passing. While buried treasure is mostly fiction, it's still fun to imagine a pirate crew raiding a merchant ship, then hiding their ill-gotten goods on a remote island, the wind in their sails and the smell of the sea in their noses. This lawlessness, in combination with the sense of freedom they inspire, is why pirates and their havens spark our curiosity. The Morbid Curiosity podcast was produced by H. Lloyd. If you'd like to get in touch or suggest a morbid topic for me to talk about, you can tweet the show at Morbid Podcast or find us on Facebook and Instagram at Morbid Curiosity Podcast. If you like the show, please share us on social media and please give us a rating on Apple Podcasts or whatever podcast app you use. Your shares and ratings help us expand this wonderfully creepy community. Thank you to everyone who liked, commented, followed, and shared the MCP on social media. Lauren, Marty, Sarah, Mallory, Amelia, Rebecca, Betty, Madge, Rachel P., Megan F., Alex N., June, Mark P., Jenna, Rochelle, Dinah, Morgan, Mina, Libby, Carol Rianne, Claire, and Tagan all have my eternal gratitude for becoming patrons or for switching to the double episode tiers. Thank you all so much. You're amazing. Because of you, the listeners, our creepy community is growing, especially on Facebook, so head over there to engage with other listeners, discuss episodes, suggest topics, and share your own morbid curiosities. The MCP has joined the Straight Up Strange podcast network, which hosts true crime, paranormal, history, science, folklore, and other enigmatic podcasts. Nothing is off limits when you enter the world of Straight Up Strange. The MCP is also part of a wider creepy community known as the Belfry Podcast Network. Check out other shows on the Belfry Network at www.thebelfry.rip. If you want to support the MCP but would rather not become a patron on Patreon, you can give one-time donations by going to our website, www.morbidcuriositypodcast.com, and clicking the donate button. Also on our website, you'll find links to all our social media, a list of episodes, and other ways to contact us, including our mailing address. Another way to help the show is by visiting our Amazon wishlist at bit.ly/morbidwishlist. That's bit.ly/morbidwishlist. Any purchases from this list are greatly appreciated. We are eternally grateful for your support. My name is Hallie, and until next time, thanks for listening.